Hello and welcome to WJTS in.form. I guess you could say this is part 2 of our discussion with Mark Messmer, who is a state representative for District 63, which represents the WJTS viewing area. We had him on last night talking about some things. We're going to have him on again tonight, continuing because there's always so much to discuss with what's coming up in the legislature. Mark, welcome to the show.
Great. Good to be here again.
Well, now last night we left off with the bill having to do with family wineries, but there's so much more that's going to be coming up. Let's continue with some of the discussions that are going to be going on.
Very good. Yes, so yesterday we talked about residential leases, we talked about wineries, we talked about trespass on farm property, some other issues that we talked about.
Let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
I want to ask you this. So you're talking about things that were studied over the summer.
Correct.
In study groups. These aren't laws that have been passed. These are not even probably bills that have been completely crafted
Not yet.
Okay.
Yep.
So these are things that you're looking at and talking about.
Usually the study committee issues typically are bills that were partially discussed during the past session, couldn't really didn't have enough time. A lot of times you run out of time. When you consider during a regular session, during a long session we'll have 6 committee meetings per committee, and you have an hour and a half per committee, and normally you have 2 to 3 bills that you want to try to run through each week, to try to get through as many things that were assigned to your committee as you can, and some of these issues, I mean, we talked about, like on the residential lease issue, we talked 4 or 5 hours of one committee day. Well, that would take you potentially 3 committee hearing slots, to do during a session, and when you have ones that just take that much discussion time and that much debate, you just run out of time. So they assign them to interim committee where you have a bigger window, where we could take a whole week, take from 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock, lunch break. I mean, you could take a significant amount of time, to debate these issues, to kind of weed out boil down to what's the real issue, and okay, maybe we don't need something as comprehensive as they started with last session, but let's get down to the nugget that that does need to be addressed, but you can't usually get there unless you really have a thorough vetting. So that during the interim study committees, that's what we do.
Okay.
The trespass issue, probably some of the most important debate we had on that one was having the Hoosier Press Association come in, the broadcasters. Their input, I mean, their commentary to me really, made immense sense of why we don't want to deal with, when you have agricultural producers, and somebody comes onto their farm and videotapes, and then they put it on the internet and fundraise and whatever with it. I mean, it's the irritation of what they do with it. But if you stop them from illegally trespassing on that person's farm and make the penalty for that significant, that's about as much as we should touch. Because if you then go into the broadcast issue of what they've collected when they were there illegally, the folks who represent WJTS did an excellent job of explaining why that's constitutionally and all of the ramifications to that, why it's probably not. I mean, it's something we wouldn't be able to do and then have it end up stand up in court anyway.
Right.
So we've got a First Amendment. First Amendment doesn't allow you to yell fire in a crowded theater, but First Amendment allows you to say what you want to say freely, no matter whether you think it's pleasurable or not, or I.
Right.
That's part of the liberties we enjoy in this country. So, but that allows us to really dig into the weeds and really get down to to what's the root issue that needs to be touched, and what do we need to let go.
Okay.
And those bills were really tangled up in session because time just doesn't. I mean, you've almost got to have them ready to go when you get to session, and you might want to tweak them a little bit, because maybe something wasn't just quite right. But when you got a bill that starts and it goes through huge rewrites, and that causes a lot of heartburn.
That's why you have the study committee.
That's why you have study committees.
Narrow that down if you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, so what are some of the other things that we did not discuss yet?
Okay. Well, one of the weeks we had come in, we have economic development leaders. Some counties call them LEDOs, some call them like Du Bois Strong. We have representatives from folks like that all over the state. We have business leaders from all, large corporations from all over the state, and we have one of our main economic advisors for the state of Indiana, really is widely recognized across the country, is Professor Michael Hicks from Ball State. I mean, he's just so valuable to us. And one of the days we spent just listening to those folks and okay, what policy are we doing? What are we not doing? Where's the next stumbling block we need to clear? And two of the bills that I had filed last session that I never could get the IEDC to weigh in on were bills that we talked about again this session, and the governor's folks, were just getting their new commissioners were just getting into place when session started last year, and I think they were not really prepared for how lightning quick our sessions move. So they didn't really weigh in on two of the bills that I authored last year, but they did this year during that day of general policy discussion. And one of those that I'll refile was getting rid of sales tax on data warehouses. And a data warehouse is kind of like it's the cloud processing centers that you hear folks advertise. It's your off-site internet backup systems. We know of them from home use, but there's hospitals with medical records. I mean orders of magnitude of thousands times bigger than you would use at home, that need that off-site storage as well. And up in Northwest Indiana, we've got some areas where you've got huge customers looking for places, the Chicago area, looking for areas in Northwest Indiana to locate those data warehouses. And we've been we did some property tax adjusting to how we treat those groups for property tax valuation a couple years ago, and the last stumbling block that we had on that one was if you've got, I'll say, $100 million to $1 billion worth of computer equipment, and you charge 7% sales tax, it could be a $7 million to $70 million disadvantage to locating that business here, and it just shoots that possibility out of the water. They can go to North Carolina, they can go to the state of Washington where they don't charge sales tax on those, and sometimes mileage doesn't make any difference on where that stuff goes, but we've got customers, we've got spots that are lined up. There's big internet, I guess call them arteries that that run through those areas that'll make it a perfect spot to locate those type of off-site data warehouses, and taking the sales tax off of that equipment of sale. You can say, well, you'll lose $7 million. No, you're not going to lose $7 million because you're never going to get the sale of that $100 million of equipment in this state. So 7% of nothing is nothing.
Yeah, but you gain through
income. You get income tax
people,
and all the other the hundreds of people that it takes then to operate those are $100,000 jobs. So there's other things you gain from it. So that one's coming back. And then I had one on there's a tax credit program that IEDC, that's the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, that's our state incentives group that's one of the governor's agencies. They've got a program that when you start up a new company, it's called the Hoosier Business Tax Credit, and if it's an Indiana business, it's one of the they can take a percentage of the initial investment and then set up a tax credit that you can use for the first 5 years of your operation is roughly how it works. But the problem is many new companies, almost all new companies, your first 1, 2, 3 years of business don't make profit. There's so much startup and capital. There's so many things that go with a startup that you don't always hit the gate profitable, and that tax credit is non-refundable currently. It can only be used those first few years to offset profit. Well, it doesn't become much of a tool if those companies aren't profitable. And IEDC this year agrees that for them to be able to utilize that tool most effectively would be allow that credit to be refundable if the company loses $10,000 or $50,000 their first year, which can easily happen. It'll allow them to use that credit as a refund. As if they have a loss, they can use it to offset a loss. If they have a gain, they can use it to offset a gain. Make it a real tool. Because without it, now most companies say, well, I'm looking at your state, I'm looking at this state, theirs is refundable. And most states that have it, it's refundable, and yours is not. And if I'm looking at my first few years, my projections are not to be profitable, I'm going elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And we want Indiana to be pro-business. That brings
Right.
companies in, companies hire
Yep.
people
Yep.
pay state tax,
Yep.
state income tax.
You
that
pay
all
income
goes into the
tax,
coffers.
you buy a home, you
Yeah.
pay a property tax, you buy groceries, you pay sales tax. There's a lot of other taxes that get generated from holding off receipt of, most of the time our incentives are rarely are they a cash payment to anybody for anything. Rarely. They're usually, offsetting an increase in property taxes, offsetting an increase in income taxes, offsetting, they're delaying, the collection. They're taking what would be your full tax amount later, and they're letting you ramp up, to the full value. Rarely is it okay. Here's $1 million for you to start your business. That almost never happens. But it's usually incentives that, okay, if you create the jobs, if you have the growth, we'll delay your property tax bill till year 10. We'll do, there's things that are all set up to be, rewards for locating here, growing here, but usually not cash up front. They're usually credits for things that you're doing as you're doing what you said you'd do.
Okay, now you've had these study groups, you've got some ideas. I guess you could still come up with new ideas.
Oh, absolutely.
There's still time.
Yeah.
And people should contact you for opinions on things.
Absolutely. I thought one of the most exciting pieces of legislation that I got passed last year didn't come from a study committee. It didn't come from a lobbyist. It came from the people right here in our district, right here in District 63. It started out with the Bennington Levee Project in Davis County, and that same code section that deals with levees deals with floodways and floodplains. And we were able to tie on the Jasper Cabinet area between the bridge on 3rd Street and the bridge on the Newton Street Bridge, and identify that area for the abandoned, empty Jasper Cabinet building for residential development. And that came from people calling saying, I got an idea, I got a problem, how can you help? And that's, I'm sure, at least half, if not 3/4 of the legislation we pass each year is constituents called their representative and said something, and whether, I don't care if it's Department of Corrections, Department of Homeland Security, Bureau of Motor Vehicles, Department of Revenue, every state, Department of Child Services, you name the state agency, we write the rules for them, and if there's something that just isn't working and your constituents call, that's how we get stuff. The lion's share of what we do is going back and adjusting something that's either out of date or needs improved, or people just think it's not something that's set up fair. It was, something got missed along the process when they wrote the bill originally, and most of the time it's going back and cleaning up and adjusting those those prior pieces of legislation that were done. So, always love to hear phone calls from folks. Email me. You can email me to the state, the h63@in.gov address. You can call me at home. You can look me up on my website, and there's a email link on there. There's tons of ways to track me down, but calling me at home is just fine too. And we're in the phone book, or 634-1589. If you've got an idea for legislation, love to take those ideas, because there's nothing more fun than going and doing battle and seeing your bill, that is something near and dear to somebody at home, and see that come to fruition.
And really, if Mark's not in your district, call the person who is in your district.
Right.
And everybody's, that's your job. All right. Well, Mark, thank you very much for coming in. We
You're
really
very
appreciate
welcome.
you taking the time. We hope to have you back again, and when we're in session, we'll have some information
We'll
from
love
you
to
then
do that.
too. All right. Thank you for watching WJTS in Form. We are local people watching local people.